All right, we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to LunarCRUSH Live. We got an awesome live stream today. Super excited. I know you guys have been asking questions out there. They're in the queue. We're going to get to them. We already got Shaman Unite down here. I don't know what's going on with this one.
Xenophobic Trab.
But we're super excited. We got Thomas Ambrosia here from Safe Haven. Growth ops, all the above. Great team. We're super excited to have you here, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Big fan of you guys.
Awesome. Well, I want to get into, the project and, your involvement and everything else there. And John and I have been kind of pinging each other back and forth all morning, just like, dude, this is so cool. And they're solving such a huge problem. And, it's a very unique, but totally needed problem for anyone that's, out there thinking about, your custody and your coins and what happens, when the unthinkable happens or the uncertain happens, and how does that work? And it's an absolute cluster right now out there in the world to, pass things along. And, what does it look like, with insurance products when you pass away, or you just want to give away something. And so I'm really excited to kind of break into that and talk a little bit more about how that works and how you guys thought about approaching that problem. But first, give us a little background about you. Specifically, how'd you get into space? What got you excited about the space, and what you're excited about?
Well, I mean, I got into the space, I would say probably in 2014. Just a friend of a friend, if you will, how most people kind of get into it. You start to hear a little bit, and then you have a friend that is actually in the space or something like that. So usual progression of things, right? So you become, you start investing in the space, and you start to find knowledge within the space. And then from there, you start to find projects and teams that you really kind of gravitate towards, right? Now, I was in the space, and I worked with a lot of exchanges in 2016 through probably I should say 15 through 17 in referral type things, and then started working with Safe Haven. We were brought together by, again, an acquaintance that we shared, and we kind of hit it off as far as the outlook, the approach, and where the visions were, right? Where the visions were. So that's essentially kind of how I came to the space. I've been with Safe Haven since the beginning of 2018. We've been here, Safe Haven's been here since 17. We migrated from Ethereum over to Vechain Thor blockchain. And we've kind of found our home there. So, thank you to Vechain for bringing us over several years now. So we appreciate that. And as far as what I do with Safe Haven is, growth, basically. We're looking to how we have an outreach towards people, and what we, how we release information, and how we contact traditional asset versus crypto asset. I kind of am the right hand to CEO Lugino Dujargin. But again, dropping nukes. We'll see about that. Thanks there, Joe. So with that being said, the community knows me pretty well. Been around since 18, as I said, and looking forward to answering some of the questions that we've passed on Twitter and whatever you guys have on board.
I'm personally excited to talk about death during this live stream. It's a big topic out there. But
yeah,
I do want to address something you said. You migrated from Ethereum to Vechain, and I'd love to hear about how that went. What was going on that even drove that to be part of your what you guys were exploring to do?
It was really the tech. Vechain had the tech that we utilized for several of our platforms. Also at the time, Ethereum was booming, right? So that's 17, which would have been right about when the bubble started to really kind of first, I guess you could call it the first, I think it's a bubble, the first crypto bubble sort of started to expand. And you needed to become unique. You know, there were a million ICOs or TGEs, token generation events going on at that time. So therefore, we needed something that set us apart. So between setting us apart and Vechain already had a really, really well-established community. And also then the fact that Ethereum was kind of a dime a dozen, if you will, for ICO and stuff like that, for getting your project out there. And there was a lot of support from Vechain to migrate over. So that's kind of where we were. Now, business talks, of course, occurred, and we just found that it was in our best interest, especially, again, tech-wise, to be able to move over to Vechain Thor as opposed to Ethereum at the time.
When you say from a tech perspective, was that the number of transactions? Was that fees, gas fees and things? What was that?
MPP, which is it's a protocol that allows us to do mass payment because we are DeFi. We were DeFi before DeFi was cool, or it really had a hashtag, so to speak. We were able to basically our platforms, especially let's say ThorPay, which is not live yet, though it is pretty much done and ready to go. That allows us to do mass payment with a single click of a button and make sure that it confirms all the way through with all of the payments. If not, the entire payments come back as one transaction. So clauses, stuff like that. So and Vechain had that, and that's what our CTO Jorgen Schoop was interested in utilizing, because he's really the brains behind it. I mean, the guy is an absolute genius. So shout out to Jorgen. Hope you're watching, buddy.
Very cool. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I mean, like, what's the elevator pitch for Safe Haven? Like, what do you guys go out there with, which is just like the 1 to 2 sentence? You know, I know it, like kind of going through, you know, the white paper, which we were talking about before, you know, you said was written a while ago. I think it's still awesome. And it obviously is, there's a super focus on passing along, you know, coins upon death and everything else, and just like the structure. But like, what is like the one sentence pitch?
You know, it's hard because there's not really a one set spit, you know, because of the fact that we're not only focusing on the crypto market, which is basically you know, age-wise, it's not a group of people who are necessarily looking that far ahead, right? And that's something that we believe is going to increase, but it's going to progress over time, right? Because of the market increasing and such, more wallet users and stuff, and adoption. Right. It just depends on who the focus is, right? So if we're looking at traditional market, right? So there's traditional markets that hold vaults and stuff like that. So a pitch to, let's say, a traditional vault-like inheritance provider would be, hey, you know, this technology is coming. It's moving forward. And what you have right now, though a vault and works in a traditional model, I can't give you my private keys, right? Because that's the problem. If I give a traditional vault my private keys to any wallets or any passwords or anything like that I might have, like, let's say it's a password for an exchange, and let's say it's private keys to a Bitcoin wallet. Okay, I can't just give that to a vault. First off, they're centralized, right? So that's a big issue, because if they're centralized, somebody else can access that information through a hack or through you know, some sort of illegitimate you know, maneuver within the backside. And these guys are also getting questions now in regards to cryptocurrency, right? So how can they're getting questions, whereas people are asking them, you know, how do I give you the access to my cryptocurrency, but also protect myself? And as we all know pretty well, you know, if you don't maintain the PKs, you don't maintain your private, then it's not your crypto. I mean, that's the old exchange verbiage, right? Which is, if you don't own your private keys, it's not your crypto. And that's, so the pitch for traditional market is you have to adapt to crypto, if you have customers that are going to be coming to you with crypto wallets, right, you need to be able to provide something to them that allows them to maintain their currencies, their cryptocurrencies, while being able to pass them along without giving somebody else the rights to those. Okay. For someone who is young, right, millennial here. So if for someone who is young like myself, it's really, you know, do you have children? Do you see yourself, you know, making, let's not say large amount of money, but let's see, do you see yourself with growth regarding your cryptocurrency, and what would happen, right? And John, you kind of hit the nail on the head there when you talked about death. You know, it's a scary subject to talk about. It's morbid, but it's the truth, right? And most people have something set up in the traditional market sense because it's very easy. There's a lot of different verification in that process, right? But there isn't in crypto, and that's a problem because
this is definitely something that folks should think about a little bit earlier in life. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons why setting yourself up for the future when you're younger, first off, it's easier to make those decisions. So like, for example, some basic things like a whole life insurance policy or a life insurance policy or something like that in your 20s is going to be cheaper for you to get when you're younger because you're healthier. It's also easier to sign on the dotted line with a financial advisor, whoever you're with at 25, because you're kind of thinking in your head, man, that's a long time away. I don't really, you know, it's a crazy to think about, but it's also a very selfless thing to think about, is thinking about and preparing for the future when you're doing that. But I think it's good for people to get set up when they're younger. But you're right, a little bit of the older generation where this is, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it's, you know, when you're looking and you're talking with, you know, your parents and, you know, they've got an Excel spreadsheet of 4,000 accounts and random passwords, and then they lose the laptop and then they're freaking out because they're thinking they're never going to get in. And now they're like, you know, they're calling all the banks and trying to find logins, and they weren't even logged in before. So there's so much there where it's the organization of it all, it seems like, is just in absolute disarray. And then, you know, to organize that, but then also to decentralize it in those two plays is such a needed product on the market. I mean, this is a huge marketplace, especially with the baby boomer generation, where tons of generational wealth is being held. And, you know, the government's coming after a lot of it if you're not set up correctly, and you're basically just losing money when you shouldn't. So that stuff was really interesting. And then I do have one like more pointed question, which was like, you know, so looking at, I think it was, and I got the white paper kind of pulled up here because I was going through it, looking at just like children, right? And so if there's different numbers of children and different numbers of validators, and the children each need a part of the key in order to kind of create that key together. I mean, what does happen when there's like child conflict, right? Or, you know, you've got maybe the legal entity that was supposed to be the validator. What happens if they go out of business, right? Like how did you guys think through some of these more detailed problems when it came to validation in children?
So the big thing here is there is some responsibility that of course goes to the initiator, right? So there's responsibility on the initiator. Let's say it was me, right? It's responsibility to that initiator. And that is going to essentially kind of be the catalyst for what may or may not happen. Now, as far as, you know, you have everything from backup shares, and those backup shares essentially are going to be the scenario where a child is not able to, or there's an issue between, right? You know, and this is what we kind of recommend to people is use legal entities, right? We have legal entities for a reason in this landscape. And if you don't use the legal entities, it's more likely for scenarios like that to occur. So, you know, there's going to be some potential for, let's say, some discrepancies, right? And while you're here, you can make multiple plans, and that's essentially what you're going to need to do. Is in the situation where there's a discrepancy within family or discrepancy of your initial your validator, you're still here in that situation. So these are things like you would normally do. You would keep up with your password list. You would keep up with your banking information. You would keep up with your lawyer if you have a will, right? So let's assume that in this situation, you know what's going on in your family, and it's going to be your responsibility to update that just as you would a will, or just as you would any other aspect of inheritance, or like you said, generational wealth, moving that wealth if you're not there, right? So the idea is we can't stop the world from turning, right? The important thing is that while we're here, we make sure that we take the steps necessary to protect ourselves. Nothing is ever going to be foolproof, right? It's important that we take those steps.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. When I was thinking through it, I was like, well, there's going to be someone or something that's going to have to potentially hit and create the action of dispersing, the coins or whatever that you're passing along. And then I kind of was thinking in step with Elon's Neuralink. I don't know if you saw that the other day, but I was just thinking of this like kind of crazy dystopian future where it's like, maybe there's something that's inside of you that actually knows if you're alive or dead in the future. It's not going to take a couple of people's keys. It's going to know.
Right. Yeah. He would be the mind to do that. I mean, now granted that's beyond blockchain, almost into AI, if you will, which is going to be, that maybe somewhere down the road.
That would trigger you guys, right? So it's like the device knows that I've passed away. Now it triggers you and like the people in the will, or the people that they've put into the smart contract. Bam, it just knows. It's like doesn't need the court document to say there's no death certificate, right? It just knows. That's much in the future, but that's when I saw that I was like, whoa, like this is like something that people are working on. That's not too far out there, but pretty amazing. Really good stuff. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the social and growth that you guys have done, just because, you start, like you're saying, you started in 2017, you've built on Ethereum, you've moved to Vechain, which John and I know has an amazing community. They're everywhere, and they're a great project. And so kind of moving to that, I mean, how have you looked at growth a little bit in the last couple of months and DeFi coming online and kind of trying to create your place in that space, knowing that, like you're saying, you guys are kind of like original DeFi?
Well, I think the big thing was that we had to kind of educate people as far as what is real DeFi, right? Or what makes up a team and a solution that is a decentralized finance solution, right? And then we kind of had to work into our communities that, hey guys, you don't realize it, but you've been involved in a DeFi project from the very start, right? And a lot of these are yield farming type tokens and projects and stuff like that. And that's an aspect of decentralized finance solutions, sure, but it's not necessarily an advanced version of that where you have platform based, right? So what we've kind of done is we've taken an approach with the community, and we have a stellar, absolutely fantastic community that is incredibly supportive, and we rely on those community members, the shamans, if you will, and
okay, so that's where that comes from. I was trying to figure that out. Did they self-label themselves, or did you guys come up with that?
That's something we did. That was actually a self-label that they sort of did in regards to they you have the XRP army and you have Link Marines and stuff like that, and they just decided they were just going to adopt that name. So kudos to those guys out there, and it's really kind of caught. But with that being said, our marketing has kind of it's never really been this big decentralized finance DeFi marketing type. Our marketing has always been through transparency to the community, right? So it's educating the community, transparency to the community, and giving them the information that is succinct and as well as understandable. So that way, when they go onto the media networks, as far as the social platforms and stuff like that, they can explain it almost as well as some of us can. So the trick is the education aspect, right? It's not just we've been here long enough where we're now educating our community. So I don't want to say that we tried to capitalize on the DeFi. Sure, I mean, who isn't right now? But we've been true to our we've been
We got a lot of shot.
Well, that right there was the CEO. So, but
I
with
just got to
that,
give all these guys a shout right here. They just went to town on this.
Yeah. So when we see these things go on, you know, the biggest thrill for us is that our community is just completely supportive, and it's really just the education aspect of it, right? So get the community behind you. Be transparent when you have a mistake, because these things happen, right? Don't make up some excuse that we're not going to address that issue. We address it openly with the community, and the community understands, and that's how we move forward, right? And that's why we have a strong community that, you know, you get a couple of people who have some, they're not content with what we might say, but the community is able to kind of explain and talk them down, so to speak, and say, hey, you know, soft dates are not hard dates, and roadmaps are, you know, they're just a map. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to hit it by Q2 or Q3. It just means that it's something for the team and the community to look at, which is why we've done away with roadmaps entirely, because at this point it only sets up false pretense, right? So people are thinking, oh, they're going to hit this. We run into problems just like anybody else, you know. In every project we run into problems, and roadmaps kind of give people that false sense that, oh, they're going to hit this, and that's not always right.
Yeah, well, the market changes and you have to pivot. And, you know, if you're not listening to your customer base, you're not listening to what your customers want, and you're just trying to hit some marks out there, especially kind of as a startup, you know, you're going to have to pivot and you're going to have to figure it out. So I think that's a good approach to going after a new roadmap, which I think is great. And I mean, like, so just to kind of lay the land a little bit right now, I mean, is there a product right now where I can interact with? I can kind of start down this. Are you guys still in kind of like building phase on some of this stuff?
There's actually a couple products that are out right now. I mean, Thor Block is one, and that's a decentralized pooling option that is out there. SafeKey, I should have pulled one out here, because I do have one of my SafeKeys someplace. Oh,
you guys have a hardware device, huh?
Yeah, that's the hardware device. Okay, and that is what we are going to use for the transport of. That's where we're going to use the transport of the shares for the merging, in regards to your Inherity, which is the inheritance platform. Okay, so there are products out there that we are pushing. That MySafe wallet, it's just like a MetaMask for Vechain holders, right? And a lot of these we built in support of the Vechain blockchain. Inherity was our you know, blinders up type of solution. That was our core, and we have patents on it, or patents pending, I should say. US, China, Europe, and now Hong Kong. We're moving forward with that patent on the technology inside the SafeKey, which was again developed in partnership with NitroKey out of Germany, and is the brainchild of, again, our CTO, to be able to take a USB key, so to speak, and you know, FIDO two-factor authentication, and authenticate. You know, authenticate the user, and be able to store merged shares of blockchain data on a key, basically.
Very cool.
So is it, just to understand that user experience a bit here, do I have to have the safe key? I have to have my coins stored on the safe key?
No, it's not a wallet. No,
it's not a wallet.
The safe is not a wallet. Okay, the safe is just a means to carry the merged blockchain data, right? It's encrypted, right? So what you're essentially doing, and I wish we could zoom in, because actually the back wall there sort of has a diagram, but we can't see it too well. All right, right. So thank you. You merge. You go onto Inherity, and Inherity, you put in the data that you want to put in. So that's it's a decentralized platform. You're merging that data together after you encrypt it and splice it. Okay. So now there's plenty of other things that you're kind of scrolling through that safe key web shop, right? And there's a lot of other things that essentially the safe key is going to be able to do. We're talking about authentication of transaction. That might come into play with Thor Pay, that type of thing, okay? But you're basically taking information on the Inherity platform. You're typing in your information. So this could be passwords, PKs, various, it could be a recipe. It could be a family recipe, all right? You know, so with that being said, you put in the information, and the safe key essentially goes into the computer, right, through the USB, and the data gets encrypted on our platform. We don't store any data, okay? The data gets encrypted on the platform, and you insert based on Inherity, and we'll see that rolling out to our beta group very shortly. You'll see that data get encrypted, and then it'll get spliced, and you'll place in your safe keys one at a time, and portions of that data, right, portions of the smart contract, I should say, would be uploaded onto those safe keys. And then what you could do later on is merge the process, right? So the portion of those safe keys, let's say you have 4 safe keys with a validator, including a validator, you're going to take those safe keys, and you're going to validate, right? And then you're going to merge those keys based on how many you have. So the data inside of that is, again, going to is going to spit back out on our platform, okay, based on blockchain, based on the smart contract. So it's encrypted on the platform, and it's merged back on the platform, and it's stored on blockchain, okay? The validator share is stored on the blockchain, which is the purpose of running blockchain in this system.
So then, so someone dies, they've got their coins. I guess where can the coins be? Can they be on any exchange, hardware wallet?
Well, okay,
Doesn't matter.
What we're looking to do is we're looking to work with exchanges to integrate the platform on the exchange.
Okay.
Right. With that being said, right now, let's assume I had tokens on KuCoin, right? I'm able to take information to get into my KuCoin account. Now, we're working on sort of learning the bypass. We're looking into the tech that can bypass like a authenticator type app, okay? Or maybe not bypass, but we're looking to work along with exchanges to allow them to, if SafeKey is on their back end, okay, they can, once they have an indication that the files or that the data has been merged by the authority, right? Then what they'll be able to do is disable that authenticator and let people in based on password and username, right? But the password and username, again, is encrypted. It's encrypted and spliced, so that way you have to have everybody come together, right, to get that data, which essentially means that if, let's say I have my PK or something like that on SafeKey, I pass away, or not in this situation, let's say I'm still alive, right? Now, and somebody, let's say my wife, and this is not really what happens in my life, but let's say my wife and my kids are like, you know what, we can run away with dad's money, you know, and they start the merging process. Well, the merging process is going to start, and it's going to send me a bunch of dead man switches that I picked up, that I decided to set up, right? So I'm going to, you know, I might get an email, I might get a phone call, I might get a text message, right, that says you need to log into Inherity because someone is trying to merge your process, to merge your keys, right? And of course, if I'm no longer here, that's okay because they need to be merged. Yeah. But if I am here, then they can't, right? Then if I am here, then they can't merge that without me having some interaction with our platform to ensure that no foul play is being conducted. Okay, so the exchanges would kind of do the same thing in the sense that right now we can do, you know, anything can be encrypted and spliced on the platform. Like I said, it could be a recipe, it could be a poem, it doesn't matter. But it's all based on this decentralization aspect of, we don't hold any data. The safe keys hold data, but they only hold enough data just to start the process and pull everything together. And that again is encrypted, and you need everybody there to do it.
It almost seems like, Thomas, that it would be interesting if you guys took on 2FA, because if the 2FA,
there is 2FA on it.
Okay, because if you could pass along the 2FA, at least for the centralized exchanges.
Oh, you're talking about the two-factor authentication on like an authenticator app?
Yeah, like an Authy or Google Authenticator. It's if you guys did the same thing, and I said, hey, I'm setting myself up for the future. I'm using Safe Haven as my 2FA provider. And now the same process takes place. And now I could just pass along my 2FA to the people that need to be put in place.
Well, you can essentially use a safe key as you would a two-factor authenticator hardware device. I mean, it is FIDO to U2FA. So essentially, you could do that, but it's not the rolling type like you would have an Authy or a Google Authenticator. That's right. Not. I mean, it is definitely something that we are thinking about. It's out in the future at this point, because we're just trying to make sure that we can launch the product that way. I mean, we've seen the product work. We've demoed it for several different organizations. It's a working product. It works exactly the way that we expected it to. We can splice the shares, we can pull them off the blockchain, we can get the data back. Okay, and that's the big important thing. Then as we progress, we're looking at USB-C and NFT, stuff like that.
So someone's got their coins on a number of exchanges that has all been configured to work within this smart contract and the safe key.
Mm-hmm.
Someone then passes away. They're leaving their inheritance to 4 people.
Sure.
So would that be 4 different safe keys? Each person has one, or is that just how does that all come together? It
doesn't necessarily be the 4 different people. I mean, the point here is that you're taking a decentralized approach. So multiple people have to get together and basically validate that you're passed, right? So essentially, yes, you could do it that way, or you could do it with 3 validators, or with 3 safe keys. It doesn't have to be as many as you want to necessarily. So you're just kind of accessing the data, which allows, let's say, a legal entity to go back in and say, okay, now I legally have access to this stuff, right? And I'm going to take the legal steps necessary to distribute it to someone based on a will or based on their last wishes, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have, if you're going to distribute, BTC to 4 people, that you have to have 4 safe keys, okay? But you at least have to have some aspect of decentralization. Otherwise, it may not work in the sense that the theory behind it doesn't work. The tech will always work, but the theory is, how many people do you want to have involved in that process? So that way, the more people, I'm not saying go out and buy, 2 safe keys for every person, but that's a good way of looking at it, John, is that you could go, okay, I got 4 people, I'm going to give them 4 safe keys, and they'll be able to merge everything when necessary. So you're right. It doesn't have to work that way, but sure. Yeah, that's the thought behind it.
And it's using a smart contract essentially as a will. And is that legal? Is that legal? Say, like, we're in the United States here, and is that something that's recognized by the government, that your inheritance tax and things like that?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, like, the government charges you. There's like estate taxes and things like that, and this isn't ever touching a bank. And when someone dies, the banks are involved.
Sure.
How does that legally come together?
Well, see, and that's key, because we get that question a lot, which is like, legally, is this correct? I mean, it's not illegal in the sense that we're not giving them access to these funds without recommending that they follow local law and provision, right? So that's why a validator as a legal entity would be the best place to go, honestly, because just as you would write the will out and the legal entity would have the will, okay, the legal entity would also then have access to the funds on a state, on whatever you store on the safe key. It's just a movement. You're not actually getting the funds. You're getting the information to get the funds. So then that legal entity would have the information to obtain the funds, and the legal entity could put it in whatever escrow or whatever is necessary at that time. It's really to access those funds.
So Thomas, is that where this TAN, like the Trust Alliance Network, comes in? And so you're creating a validator, and that entity, which is, I think, maybe why you guys ended up going with someone like a Vechain, because it works perfectly,
right,
in order to have that kind of not centralized, but somewhat third party.
Yeah, I mean, you could do this. I'm sorry, you could centralize, but you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk in a legal sense, right? The Trust Alliance Network, when that starts rolling and Inherity is out, and we start enrolling legal entities in that, right? That is one of our intent, is to enroll legal entities across the world who are now starting to get those questions about cryptocurrency, right? How do I write something on my will, which is the access to all of my funds? You could run away with it, and then I have no way of really proving that because it's blockchain, right? So, but if I give a legal entity a safe key and they're the validator, right? So they're initiating the process upon, let's say, my family presenting a death certificate, and he's taking the legal precautions, and he's looking at it from a legal perspective of, okay, now we're merging this together, and now we have the information for Tom's private key, right? And then you just essentially would be plugging in a private key, and then boom, you have access to my wallet, right? So to answer your question, yeah, we want people to have a third party interaction with this, because there's still laws and you still have to obey them, right? This is a means for someone to give somebody the pieces needed, the puzzle pieces needed to get your essentially the growth and the wealth that you've accumulated in cryptocurrency, without at the same time giving away your keys or giving away too much information when you're still living, right? Because then you don't have, you've weakened the security behind blockchain.
Yeah, you'd think that some of these legal entities and lawyers that are, trust and will, that are kind of in this space, I mean, you guys are going to be a lead pipeline for people like that coming and signing up for this. And I mean, they're probably going to be scrambling to try and be a part of this, because as people are trying to understand and how does this work, it just becomes a great place for them. And can they share in some of the upside by getting the coin, or is there a service fee that's paid for them for being a legal entity validator in this Trust Alliance Network? How does it work for those entities?
Right, and that was the original plan, and I believe we're still looking to possibly integrate something like that. We've had some conversations within the founders and within the team that we still want to move forward with at one point, when everything has been built and ready, possibly issuing a TAN token. We've kind of put the backseat on that, but we're still looking at that being a potential. It comes up, once a quarter or something like that. Now we're really much more focused on making sure the product rolls out, its usability and its simplicity, in the sense that, people who are not, let's say, blockchain savvy can simply use it. And that's the other thing, the learning curve of blockchain, right? So the intent would be, of course, to try to find ways to incentivize legal entities to get involved. But then again, the thing with that is, you pay someone in a traditional situation to handle a will, to handle your wishes after passing. I think what's going to happen, and this is, I would imagine that the majority of the space, because we're all in this space, right? We're here. I think that the majority of the space would agree that this is not going to be, maybe right now you have to coerce somebody into it, right? To recognize that this is going to be something. But 5 or 10 years from now, it's going to be standard. There's going to be standard digital inheritance. You're going to have it, and that's just going to be part of business as usual. You might even be able to say that this is now called, like 5, 10 years from now, cryptocurrency may be known as traditional, right? Whereas right now it's disruptive, right? So eventually it's going to normalize, and validators or legal entities are just going to have to have a means to do that. And people are not just going to willingly hand over, PKs. and information for exchanges and passwords and whatnot, because it just doesn't, it's not secure. They can hand bank account information over. It's a lot of verification in that process, right? You can't just go onto someone's bank account, but you could sure download a Bitcoin wallet, pop in a PK, and pull that money and run. You can't do that with a bank account.
Right.
So that's the problem.
There's two sides to this too. I mean, there's the individual dies and loses their coins, but the continuity of the entire crypto space is dependent on all these coins not just vanishing someday.
Well, yeah, that's true too.
I mean, technically, to an extent, some of it is a form of burning the coins. They just vanish. Like you hear a lot about this with Bitcoin, and there's way less actual Bitcoin out there. But you can't just have people dying and they're losing a huge sum of wealth and it just vanishes. The difference between that and banks is that bank account is backed up and backed up and backed up. Crypto is not, especially if someone's doing self-custody and they lose it and only they know the passwords and everything. So it's a really big deal. I'd love to talk about some of the social insights that we keep seeing about your project, unless there's any other questions. And then maybe we'll take a whole lot of questions from the community.
Yeah, I would say pull that one up too.
Yeah.
So I'm sharing my screen, Joe. Let me know when you're seeing it.
Yeah, you're up.
So I just wanted to go over some things that we've been measuring. And this is actually, I think, we started doing some posts a little bit ago. Going, what is this safe haven thing? We hadn't heard of it until a few months ago. And, we've been looking at it like, wow, look at that price increase. The last 3 months alone, that's not a typo. It's up 1,741%. But the more exciting thing, I just got some numbers down here. Social volume's up 1,800% versus the 3 months prior. And even more exciting is social engagement's up 4,800%. And what we're looking at there is the social volume is really looking at mentions. It's whenever someone is mentioning safe haven, the SHA ticker, variants of those, things that relate to the project. That's one element, and that's what social volume is. But engagement is when you actually have an active community that's engaging with those posts that are mentioning safe haven. And so to see that social engagement is up so much, substantially more than volume, is extremely healthy. And you can see it here. I mean, we're talking about social engagement on a daily basis. I mean, we're talking just double digits, 42 engagements back in June, which is tiny, up to almost a little over 1.9 million on August 23rd. That's huge. And so same thing with the size of the community. We're seeing single digits back here posting, mentioning, all the way up to looks like the high was 543 in a day. And these are individuals posting. And when we look at this social activity and the market activity together, we measure that through our alt rank. And in fact, I even want to go back further on this one and see what we're looking at. So we started tracking this right around here, and we just see it continually falling and falling and falling, which is good. Number one is the best in the market, and it's gone as low as looks like 12. So considering that, on August 26th, the alt rank went as low as 12 for a coin that's little under $22 million in market cap, that during that 6 months period is even up higher. This is impressive. I think the market's definitely buying your pitch. And they seem very excited because they're asking a whole lot of questions. And I'll also add, during that time, over the last 6 months, we're seeing, we've got Crypto Ed NL, Roy Noom, Richie Falkless, which is from OceanX, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Dr. H. Quisnell, we got Logino D, your founder. And so we actually measure all the influencers that are talking about the project through how much are they posting, how engaging are their posts, and what is their following looking like. And we measure that in real time throughout the different time periods. So so your social activity is obviously super hot, on fire. You still got a fairly low market cap, but with a lot of traction and rise during that period of time. What's causing this? Would love to hear more about your strategies, because a lot of projects don't have this during this period of time. Some projects are actually down, believe it or not, during the same period of time. So what's going on?
The big thing is market placement of information, and what I mean by that is when we release something, when we and how we do it. A big an important part of how we release information is we do tend to track market, social engagement, and stuff like that, which is why I love your platform, because it really just puts a whole bunch of tools right in front of me, which allows us to kind of move on certain analytic data. So we really look at sort of the sentiment within our community. We always want to make sure that we're providing some sort of transparency, some sort of information to the community. We essentially invest human capital, right, in our community, in the sense that we're always trying to give them an idea of where we are and where we're going, right? And the important thing in that perspective is a lot of teams in this space will go week after week without any information. You know, there's no, and it's just, they go dark for a period of time. I don't think we've been dark for months, honestly. Every Friday, for example, we run what we call Flash Friday updates. It's everything from what we've done that week and what we're doing moving forward, right? And what that does, it's so what that does is we are able to basically bring the community into the eyes of the team, right? Another thing that we just started doing is community roundtables. I was just on a roundtable with Logino and 4 other members of the community, and we're going to continue to do that. And it's just involving the community in the sense that, you know, we're not forgetting where we came from, in the sense that we are a community, you know, raised, driven product, you know. So with that being said, it's not forgetting that. It's not forgetting the community that's shooting those social engagements out there constantly, you know. And we have the guys who are part of our community are just, they understand what it is. They're long term, right? Their long term vision. They understand the need for this. It's hard to say any more than just what we're doing on our end, because a lot of it is also the community. You know, this is one of the most active communities I've ever seen in the space, you know, and they just continue to it's just an onslaught, and they hit everybody and everything they can. So, you know, kudos to them.
It must feel very different versus a few months ago. Just
it does feel different. In the sense that we had those people, but we were doing things that I just mentioned prior, which was sometimes we would not produce as much information as we could in that circumstance, you know. But now, you know, we took this new approach with reaching out to the community constantly, involving them in everything that we possibly can, without going and breaching NDAs or something like that. Giving them that's why we don't do a roadmap anymore, because we're telling them weekly kind of what we're moving on and where we're going, and little things that you know might be trivial for some organizations. We don't really have to say that to the community. They don't need to know that. We're going to tell them, because it's in our best interest, and it's in their best interest, because it's showing them that we're doing things, we're moving things along. And with a project like this that's small and still in its startup phase, I mean, it's important that we maintain that sort of communication between us and those who put us here.
Sounds like three things. It sounds like consistency, transparency equals community.
I actually have that written down. Did you look at my notes?
No, I didn't.
I have those same adjectives right there.
That's literally what I just wrote down, and it's part of what we believe in the same. I mean, that's part of the reason that we've created LunarCRUSH.
LunarCRUSH. I mean, that's fantastic.
Is to bring projects to the forefront that embody those features, right? And put that out to the world, because that's what this needs to be about with cryptocurrency. And that's why eventually most of the people that think that cryptocurrency is a bad thing, or it's hidden, or it's underneath the veil of something else, will realize that it's actually the exact opposite of that. And it doesn't surprise me that people outside of the community think that, because a lot of times people think the exact opposite of what something actually is, because they don't want to know, or they want to look the other way. And so, you guys are solving a problem that is 100% needed in the world, not just the crypto space. And I think as you build the product out, and as you guys are thinking about transparency and thinking about, product, I mean, people aren't even going to know. It's going to be, hey, it's also something where, like, my bank account gets passed along, and here's how it gets parsed out to all my children, and here's where my car goes, and here's where my house goes, and all my wishes are there. And so eventually it's just going to be, this is what I use to pass my life along, and here's how it works, versus, hey, here's how I pass my keys along. I think, at least, because you guys are coming from such a clean and concise arena, that it's going to be much easier for you to go step into that than a traditional company to step into what you're doing, because you're already solved.
I mean, we're seeing a lot of interest from traditional companies who are like, wow, some companies are like, we're already getting the crypto questions, and we don't have an answer for that. That's sufficient, right? So for the crypto owner who understands everything within crypto. Okay. So we're getting those questions, and those who don't, let's say, have those questions being asked yet, they know it's coming. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback from the traditional market, right? We just need to get to a point where the demand for such a product increases, which is what we're seeing with the increase in Bitcoin wallets. I mean, you have 50 million Bitcoin wallets right now. I mean, that's a huge amount from, let's say, 3 years ago, right? We're going to see that. We're going to see that growth. We're going to see that that increase of use case. So yeah, we're seeing it. We're seeing it. We're discussing it. It's being discussed with traditional companies that are like, wow, you guys really hit the nail on the head here. What is the next step, type of thing.
Right. Yeah. And it's when you're in a startup and you're in a new arena, in a new industry, you are building for the future. And I think sometimes people forget, some of us we're building for what the world looks like 5 years from now. Right. And a lot of times people don't understand that Uber started in 2007, not 2013, the first time that they took an Uber. Right. Or when Airbnb went to go raise a bunch of money, they went to 100 different VCs and they said, no one's ever going to sleep on someone else's couch. You're crazy. Right. But they were envisioning the future of what the future is going to look like. And they realized that actually, who knew that a college student would take 48 Ubers a year before they were taking 0, or the fact that people said, hey, I'll sleep on anyone's couch, or I'll go sleep, or people will set up their homes in order for people to rent them. And so we're in this space, we're building for the future. And I think the people that have been here for a while understand that. And the people that have been building through some of that crypto winter that happened are really here for the future. And so
and that's
a lot of you guys.
And that's what we did. We just kept building through that winter, and the community stayed by our side. A lot of them. I mean, you're going to have people who kind of, decide that it's not for them, and the waiting game and stuff like that. But our community has been solid through and through.
Right. Well, John, do we want to go through a little bit of the Twitter questions? We got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, and I'd say, just judging by these questions, I don't know if you could still see my screen, but
I just pulled it up.
This is the most questions we've ever had on a live stream, and we've had a lot. So I'd say there's a whole bunch more. So I'd say
there was a couple hours.
Yeah. And I think there's more on some of the other posts that you and us have posted too. But I'd suggest, Thomas, if you have about 6 hours today to go through one by one, answer everyone's questions.
But I might have to. What I'll do is, whatever we don't hit, maybe I'll touch base on every single question on the Twitter feed. That way, we at least cover everything.
I think we should give Nebula Shaman the first question here, because he's posted so many, and I think he's been posting quite a lot.
He's a big supporter. Really appreciate it.
Let's go over question 1. How positive and negative do you feel toward the future capability of trading/selling nodes, essentially collectibles?
Our nodes are designed using the same kind of framework as the VeChain nodes. So it's in discussion. It's extremely possible that it will happen in the future. So to answer your question, how positive or negative, we're positive about having to do something like that for our node program. We are.
Cool. Question 2 from Nebula. Will death certificates be required before any heirs can attempt a withdrawal? I think that kind of goes along the lines of what I was asking earlier a little bit.
Right. We sort of covered that in the sense that, we want people to use that third party validation aspect of someone passing away, because there are laws and provisions in place that is meant to protect people and protect inheritance and protect that kind of stuff. So to answer the question, it's not that we'll require them, because we can't require something that's like, I know US laws, you guys know US laws. I don't know all the laws outside of the US. So we can't require something specific like that. Though you would expect that, yes, probably, there's going to be some laws involved in that kind of situation. So take the right path, use Inherity the way we designed it, which was to make sure that that information can be safely stored, in the sense that, it can be passed on and not compromised in the meanwhile. But look at using legal entities in your inheritance digital will, if you will.
So you can use it or can't use it though. So it's like, it's an option for them. So if you're definitely
completely decentralized. It's not recommended. It's not because we're not going to be able to validate or verify the authenticity. That's meant for someone who's legally able to verify authenticity of an official document.
Right.
All right, let's move on to, at first I thought it was God, but I think it's VeChain God. What?
386468.
Yeah. Don't forget it. What region of the world is currently the most open to implementing safe haven solutions?
We're really seeing a lot of traction in the EU. They tend to be a little bit more future focused on blockchain. And that's just really our community use and looking at, where we're selling safe keys to, where they're actually being mailed to people who are going to use the solution at this point. So I would guess if you're talking about, users, EU. If you're talking about integrating the solution, we're getting interest from across the world, honestly. It's in small pockets.
Right. We've got Dennis Peters, who's also a shaman or a shaman, who I think likes the Northern Lights, if I'm looking at that properly. When can we approximately expect the first utility rewards?
It's kind of a loaded question. Utility rewards are going to be based on utility. So, and they're based on the usage of the platforms. So, it's going to be essentially when things start to ramp up. We've been talking the entire time about use case and the increase in usage and use case of digital currencies. That's a hard question to answer. I don't think I could give you a true answer, but we would like to hopefully see things start rolling out by the end of this year as far as usage is concerned.
Okay.
All right, John, let's do one more for the hour.
Yeah. And I love this one. I think this one's a fantastic idea. So Massive Shaman, who has a crystal ball and is a wizard, Massive G. And Nebula loves this one too. Thoughts on connecting Thor block charity and Inherity together, making it so that if you die, your funds go to safe haven and they decide based on given info in which charity your funds go to. I've actually worked with a bunch of nonprofits myself in the past, and this is a big deal. And it's complicated. When someone dies, where does that money go? And a lot of times they wanted to leave it to a charity. So I think that's a really great, interesting idea.
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, we obviously as a team were reading these as we went along, of course. And that is actually something that we looked at and thought, wow, we could really almost easily integrate something like that, where a Thor block charity comes into play, where you know, we look to, based on the usage of Thor block and the usage of Inherity kind of together, to give charitable donation upon someone passing. I mean, we're talking something definitely in the future. I mean, this is our community. This is what I talk about when I say our community. I explained this in the roundtable that we had last week with the members, is that sometimes our blinders are up, right? And they're focused on one thing, where the community has that their peripheral vision is just extremely, extremely well tuned. And they're able to brainstorm things that are not right in front of us at the time, because we're developing, you know, a solution, and we're going to provide a means for people to, you know, safely move assets. And sometimes things like that, you know, a little outside the box thinking, you know, our community is just right on top of it. And a lot of times in the community, if you were to speak to someone who's been in the community for a while, we'll take plenty of ideas from the community. I mean, we listen to them and we integrate, you know, and we take their recommendations because they're part of it.
Cool. Well, Thomas, man, really appreciate it. We did the full hour. Great job on the questions. Like John said, I'm sure you can get in there on Twitter and just kind of hammer out the other 400. But
yeah, we don't look to do that. It's just a way to make sure everybody gets their answers.
Thank you so much for coming on, Thomas Ambrosia. Thank you. And Growth and Ops, man. Really appreciate you having us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. All the shamans out there, we're now going to be keeping an eye on you. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.